So it took us a few years, but Ubisoft finally came out and gave us our third game in the Watch Dogs series in the form of Watch Dogs Legion, and now I've fully finished the game and I've been able to fully spend a good amount of time with it and experience everything it has to offer. I think I now have a fully rounded idea as to how I feel about this game, even though it is very, very mixed. Speculation about a third Watch Dogs game began a couple of years back, and there was a lot of theories and speculation that perhaps this third game was going to take place in London, and this led to a lot of really interesting theories about where the game was going to go, where it was going to take the characters, and even if it was going to take the characters that we already knew anywhere at all. And I think that now we actually have Watch Dogs Legion, and once we found out exactly what the game was going to be, I think none of us could have really predicted exactly the direction Ubisoft were going to take the Watch Dogs series for this third and potentially final game. So the story of Watch Dogs Legion is that London in the future post-Brexit has been taken over by this militaristic force known as Albion. They've been brought in by the British government to essentially replace the police force and to keep tabs on everyone in London, keep everyone in check, and it's basically become a military state. And it's a very interesting way to start off a game like this, especially because in the Watch Dogs series, this is kind of what it was building towards. You know, when you have the CTOS and everything like that being integrated into all major cities across the globe. We saw that in the first Watch Dogs, we saw it expanded even more in the second Watch Dogs. You know, it was kind of heading in this direction where eventually we were going to see a massive capital city, something like London, being overtaken by this overlord of security, and that's exactly where Watch Dogs Legion picks up, and we see London is just under oppression. It's under this militaristic state that it just forces its citizens to do as they are told to do. They aren't allowed to have any freedom. There are curfews. It's just a complete soldier state. There are Albion soldiers posted everywhere. They can do as they please. They can arrest citizens on sight for literally no reason whatsoever, and it's all very, very scary. And again, it just feels very much like this was the natural progression we were going to have with this game, given the fact that the first game and the second game were kind of showing the forthcoming of these security systems and what they can lead to. Watch Dogs Legion is fully showing us this is what it does lead to, and it's quite a scary thing to look at in that way. Now, while all of that is going on, we have Dedsec, who is of course our hacker group who have been around since the first Watch Dogs game. They are still active and operating in London, and they are trying their best to thwart out the Albion forces and try to take back London from this force who have taken it over. However, they are then framed for a terrorist attack by this unknown hacker group known as 0 Day, and they are not only having to deal with Albion and trying to take back the city from the people who take it from them, but they also have to deal with this 0 Day threat, figure out who they are, why they framed them, and clear their name, because Dedsec is forced to go underground and rebuild from the ground up to start this revolution to take back London. And this story I thought was really great. It was really fun, especially because you have this massive city takeover thing, which is very Ubisoft. You know, it's a very typical thing to have this big area that's taken over by this force that you have to slowly unravel and slowly take back as you progress through the game. So you have that side of it, and then you also have this mystery with 0 Day, this unknown hacker group who have framed Dedsec and basically build the foundation for this new play as anyone mechanic, which I'll get to. And all that I found really interesting. And on top of that, you also have a few other major villains throughout it as well, like gang leaders and secret agencies, and there's a lot of espionage and stuff like that, and a lot of conspiracies. And I think it all comes together in a really nice way, even though it's not as completely seamless as you would hope and as I would have liked. I think overall, the game and its story and its different structures and its different levels, I thought was really well done and really well handled. And again, it creates a nice rounded story with a lot of different variety in the different things you're going to be doing hour to hour. Now, the characters in the game are very, very interesting because each person is going to have different characters in their game to what I had. And, you know, if you're listening to this review, if you've played the game, you will have different characters than what I had. Though there are a few consistent characters throughout it, such as, you know, your allies throughout the game who are already a part of Dedsec, or the, you know, villains throughout the game. Of course, they're all consistent. But in terms of the main characters who you're going to be playing as throughout the game, that is all completely dependent on the play as anyone mechanic, you know, who you personally choose to bring into your Dedsec group and who you choose to be a part of your revolution. And that is all very dependent on the player, and I really enjoyed that because it makes everyone's game feel individual. Now, I did have a big worry about Watch Dogs Legion, which I expressed in my E3 videos a couple of years ago, which is that I was very worried that Watch Dogs Legion was kind of going to feel very disconnected and not very personal because you don't have a single main protagonist to get invested in. You just pick any NPC off the street and you can play as them after you try and recruit them. and it's just going to feel like there's no real character in the game. And while I do feel like that is true to a certain extent, I do feel like you kind of become connected to Dedsec overall as opposed to individual characters. And I did actually find myself becoming attached to certain characters within my group. Granted, not all of them. I ended the game with around 20 people in my group. I had about 20. I believe the max you can have is 45. I had around 20 by the end of the game, by the time I finished the main story. And there were a couple of members in that group who I did actually find myself attached to. Well, I didn't really have much backstory for them, just because I had chosen them myself. I had gone through the struggle of trying to recruit them, and had gone through the struggle of, actually bringing them onto the team. When they were actually there, I kind of felt like I did have a connection, and I kind of wanted to keep my group as pristine as possible. I didn't want to lose any of them. I didn't want to get any of them arrested or killed off. I just wanted to keep my group and keep building it. And that level of connection is very different from most games, but I enjoyed it. Even though it's not quite as investing as having a single main lead protagonist, it was definitely an interesting way of doing it. However, the dialogue in the game is very, very cringe, I will say. Even though there's not really much character development, there's not really much character growth throughout the game with your protagonists, you do hear them speak throughout the game and cutscenes and stuff like that, and the dialogue is incredibly cringe. It's just very over the top, very typical, stereotypical Cockney slang. It's just very, very, very abrasive, and I didn't really enjoy it. There are times when it's almost so cringe it's funny, and then there are other times when it's just it's just cringe, and it just really puts you off and sends shivers down your spine. So the dialogue is definitely not perfect in the game, and I do feel like it's almost a bit too try hard to be funny and try hard to be a Londoner. Now, I already touched on the Players Anyone mechanic a little bit, but I'll go into it a little bit more now. The Players Anyone mechanic is certainly an interesting thing about this game, and is definitely the sort of selling point of the game. Even though it's kind of weird to not have a single lead protagonist, you can basically choose anyone you want to play as. Anybody in the open world you can try and recruit and try and play as, and, anyone can be recruited. And I found that very, very engaging, because it just allows you to basically walk around. You'll be walking around this big open world, and you'll just be scanning people, looking at all these different NPCs, and you just think, wow, each character kind of has their own story, their own abilities, and you can see a little tiny hint of backstory, and you just think, wow, I can play as that person. I can go and do a mission for them and play as them, and that's really cool. Again, it's not amazing or anything, but it's really interesting to kind of play a game like this, particularly a Ubisoft game, and not have a single lead protagonist. It's really interesting, and I enjoyed that. I do think there is a downside to it. I feel like after you've played the game for a certain number of hours, you will start to see not repeated character models, but you'll start to see characters with similar abilities, and you'll start to see the same abilities popping up here and there. So not every single NPC in the world is individual and different, but that's also quite a big task considering how big the world is and how many NPCs are within the world. So it is quite a big task to, literally make every single one individual. You'd have to have literally billions of skill points and billions of, skill options. So, there are a few repeats here and there, and it can get a little bit old, particularly in the later hours of the game. But for the most part, I think by the time you get to the point I did, where you finish the main story, you've got around 20 operatives or so within your Dedsec team, I think you'll have a really nice, well-rounded group with different numbers of abilities and different numbers of things that you can use. And while it can feel gimmicky, what I did enjoy about it was that it really did add versatility to gameplay, because you can literally approach different missions in different ways depending on the character you're playing as and depending on the abilities that they have. Like, for example, if you're trying to sneak into an Albion headquarters, if you're playing as a spy character, you can just sneak in there, take everyone out silently, get what you need and get out. However, if you actually are managing to able to recruit an Albion guard into your team and actually recruit them over to Dedsec, you can then use them and their uniform abilities to actually just walk straight through the front door and steal what you need and get out again without causing a ruckus at all. So again, it's very Hitman-esque, but it allows you to just completely choose and customize your team to better suit the mission at hand. And I really enjoyed that, because it allowed to actually get more invested in this team and actually allow you to use the team to your advantage to best tackle missions, which I really enjoyed. And just one more point on the play as anyone mechanic before we move on. There is a permadeath mode in this game. I highly recommend you turn this on because it just adds way more stakes to the game. Because the permadeath mode isn't like a permadeath in most games where if you die, you have to start from the beginning. What happens is if one of your operatives that you're playing as at the time, if they die, they are gone forever. And then you then have to switch to another operative and you will never see that operative ever again. He is then dead or she is then dead. And you have to, just move on without them. And, in my entire gameplay, I lost one operative, and I was actually genuinely sad when I lost him. So much so that in the world, I then found that character's mother, and then recruited that mother, this character's mother, to my team, just because I felt bad. So, I was saying earlier about how I was worried about how I wasn't going to be connected to the characters. I mean, this one operative who I lost, he died. I then found his mum, who then hated Dedsec because her son was killed doing a Dedsec mission. I then had to work to recruit her to bring her onto the team purely because I felt bad. That's literally what I did in after I finished the story or near the end of the story. I literally went ahead and did that. So the permadeath mode definitely adds a lot more stakes and definitely adds a lot more connection than what you would have if you didn't have it turned on. So I highly recommend you turn on that permadeath mode. Now, another reason I love this game is that it's just open world London. It's not really a secret that I love London. It's one of my favourite cities in the world. I travel there very often, and it's just a beautiful city. I love going there, and being able to actually have an open world London, even though it's a bit more futuristic, it's obviously got a bit more to it than what London has today in regards to all this, military propaganda and, Dedsec propaganda everywhere. It's still a really nice open world, and it's very authentic. I was traveling around near Trafalgar Square, and I was able to literally, through my own knowledge of London, able to navigate myself to my favorite place in London, which is Leicester Square. I was able to just drive myself there through my knowledge of the roads, even though obviously it's not one-to-one. It's not an exactly 100% accurate representation of London in regards to every road is covered and every street corner is covered, etc. I knew the basics, and it was just kind of easy to find my way around London just because of local knowledge. It's particularly in the main city area, which I thought was really fun. And I also love the tube system. I was really excited to see how they're going to utilize the tube system. And the tube system is essentially the fast travel mode in the game. You can use it to get to different stations throughout the world, and I really enjoyed that. I wish you could have actually gone into the stations and got onto the train, in the underground itself. I wish that was an actual option in the game, but unfortunately it is just kind of like a fast travel terminal. But still, really cool that they utilized it and used it in a cool way. And what I really liked about Watch Dogs Legion is I feel like in terms of the gameplay, this game truly perfected what Watch Dogs was trying to be. The first Watch Dogs game was, trying to be this big hacking phenomenon, and instead it was very much a typical Ubisoft stealth action open world game. And then Watch Dogs 2 went full in on the hacking and barely focused on the combat at all, so it kind of felt very hacking heavy, so it wasn't as exciting. Watch Dogs Legion, I think, blends the two perfectly together. You have a really strong hacking gameplay mechanic throughout it, which you're able to use consistently and smart in big scale, and then you also have the really fun stealth and shooting combat that we had in the first Watch Dogs game. And I feel like it's just blended all together perfectly, so it takes all the best parts from the first game, all the best parts from the second game, and brings it all together with this play as anyone mechanic. And in terms of the gameplay, I just think Ubisoft truly perfected the Watch Dogs formula in this game. Now, I would also like to spend some time talking about the graphics in this game, and this is unfortunately where my negatives start to come in about Watch Dogs Legion. This game graphically definitely feels held back, and very much feels like it was developed for the last generation. I did play this game on PlayStation 5. Of course, this game did launch on PS5 and the Xbox Series X alongside, the Xbox One and the PS4. And the graphics in this game, they're not great. They're not terrible or anything. It doesn't look awful, but it just, in terms of the standard that we expect games to be at these days, this game just doesn't look that great. It definitely felt very janky, especially because I played this game straight after playing games like Miles Morales and Black Ops Cold War. It just didn't feel anywhere near up to the same level of standard for graphics as those games did. And I feel like that it just felt very held back. You know, it felt like this game was developed for last gen and then just put on PS5 and Series X, which isn't a bad thing. Like, if this game was developed for last generation, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, you know, it did feel like a bit of graphical whiplash going from Miles Morales and Cold War to this game. But like I say, it's not terrible or anything. It's not so bad it's distracting. It's just it did take a little bit of a while to get used to. And I think overall, the game can feel a bit janky here and there. It can feel very much like it's not as smooth or as polished as some of the other games we're playing these days. So I do feel like there is sort of this level of finality and polish on the game that isn't quite there, which is a bit disappointing. But overall, it's not a bad looking game. It's just definitely not up to the same standards as what we expect from a lot of games these days. But overall, I think Watch Dogs Legion is an incredibly fun game. Again, I didn't expect it to be as fun as it was, and what I didn't expect was for this game to truly blend together all the best elements from Watch Dogs 1 and Watch Dogs 2, and create with this new play as anyone mechanic the best gameplay formula for the Watch Dogs series that we've seen yet, and also stick it in the best setting we've seen yet in open world London. You kind of have an excellent recipe for a great game. And, you know, even though it's not perfect, like I say, I do feel like graphically the game's not great, the dialogue can be incredibly cringe, and for some people the play as anyone mechanic just might not work. You know, this game in general just may not work for you. I do feel like Watch Dogs Legion was a bold move for Ubisoft. Like, this was kind of an interesting direction to take the series. I definitely didn't expect them to go in this direction, but they fully commit to it, and that I respect and that I appreciate. They fully went in on this idea and completely built this game around it, and I think it does pay off in the long run. Even though it may not necessarily work for everyone, it's certainly unique, and I do feel like that they should be commended for that, because I haven't quite seen anything like this in a game of this size. So I really appreciate what Ubisoft did with this, and I'm still trying to decide which Watch Dogs game is my favourite. It could be the first game, or it genuinely could be this one. Like I say, because this blends all the best elements together, and I love the setting, I kind of want to say that Watch Dogs Legion is my favourite of the trilogy. However, I do also have a connection to Aiden Pierce as a character, and I do really love that first Watch Dogs game, so I'm still kind of on the fence with that, but it's certainly a contender. It easily could be my favourite game of the trilogy, which I think says a lot about how I feel about it. So overall, Watch Dogs Legion, I really enjoyed myself with this game. I think it's really fun. Again, not perfect, it may not work for everyone, but if it does work for you, I think you'll have an absolute blast with Watch Dogs Legion. So thank you guys for watching my review of Watch Dogs Legion, and also my very first gaming video in this new relaunch of the channel. I hope you guys did enjoy it. If you've played Watch Dogs Legion, make sure you let me know your thoughts on the game in the comments section down below. Very interested to hear how you feel about the game. And if you're looking forward to playing it, make sure you tell me as well what you're excited about. Make sure you tell me down in the comments down below. And as always, if you want to see more movie content, TV content, and gaming content like this, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any more uploads from me. And I hope to see you guys again in my next video.